Jesse, I'll mention that all the town halls are videoed and available. So that's through PCX, and
Yes.
you'd have to give them directions on that.
Let's see. Let me just share. I'll show you where you can find the town halls. If you've missed, this is our 5th town hall. So the other 4 are available, like Lee was saying, in the Disaster Resiliency Work Group. So if you come over to the PCX, which I'll put a link in the chat, it's free to join. Permaculture Crossing, lots of different permaculture related conversations going on. But this particular one is, if you scroll down a bit, Disaster Resiliency Initiative, and then you can join the working group. And also the town hall, and where we post new events that are coming up. And if you scroll down a little bit, eventually you'll find right here is town hall number 4, and town hall 3 and 2 and 1 are all down below that as well. So, and that's where this one will end up once we get it edited. So I'm Jesse, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. Jesse Tack with the Permaculture Institute of North America, or PINA. And our co-sponsors for this event, as always, are the Association for Regenerative Culture, or ARC, and We Regenerate, which is Corrine Brennan's work, and something that is kind of an offering to the permaculture community and the green business community at large. So we'll talk more about that at some other point, or maybe Corrine can mention that. But we're very excited to sort of co-host and co-facilitate these town halls. Like I said, this is the 5th one. We plan to have more of these with your support, with your feedback, with your guidance about maybe who we should bring in to talk to. And then this is going to culminate into a summit, which is going to be in August, which is really about disaster response, resiliency, recovery, and design from the permaculture perspective. So we'll get to do a much deeper dive, and maybe Kevin could join us then for like an hour-long presentation rather than just a 10-15 minute sort of overview. So as many of you know, we are recording these sessions. So just so you know, if you want to not be seen or something, I get it. Just keep your camera off, and that's not a concern at all. But we like to make these presentations available later, and they are available on the PCX. I'll share more about the PCX in a little bit. So I get to introduce Lee, which is my pleasure. We wouldn't be doing this without Lee Barnes. So Lee's sort of setting the vision for these gatherings, why we're doing them, and what we're really endeavoring to sort of do. So let me give Lee a proper introduction here. Lee Barnes, PhD, is president and founder of ARC, the Association for Regenerative Culture, and a passionate advocate for permaculture and environmental sustainability. With a background in environmental horticulture, Lee has dedicated over 3 decades to educating and empowering individuals to embrace regenerative practices. He co-founded the Southeastern Permaculture Gathering and has been instrumental in organizing numerous seed and plant shares, emphasizing the importance of preserving heirloom and native plant varieties. Lee's expertise extends to regional natural history, old-growth forest preservation, sustainable agriculture, and dowsing. He is a strong believer in fostering a sense of place and inspiring individuals to take responsibility for regenerating the future. Amen to that. And with that, Lee, I'll pass it over to you. I'll be your slide guy, so just let me know when you want me to move through them, but go ahead and take it away, and thank you.
I'll mention that Jesse's sidekick, Suzanne, is not with us today. So he's handling it all himself. So that's great. Well, people ask me what I do after that long bio. In this case, I was near hit by a major disaster. And let me just maybe go to the slides. So I'd like to see a show of hands, but that'd be difficult here, of how many people, for example, were directly impacted by Helen, physically, personally, and secondarily impacted, community, friends, whatever. Next slide.
Oh, there we go.
This is what we're working on right now. I want to, this normally somebody put it at the end. I'm going to put it at the beginning. I saw the destruction. I get around. I'm a land consultant, a realtor. I douse wells all across the Western North Carolina. I'm a hiker, and the devastation I saw was incredible. And I went, here's an opportunity for us to design a better future. So, working great with a basic team, we've decided that we want to approach this in a form of survival responses immediately. It's in your face, and Corrine has a one-to-one on hurricanes. It's great. So you're dealing, what do you deal with immediately? Checklists, links to other things until you lose power. We got a strategy for that. Secondly, the short-term preps, the land modifications, the sort of things you do to prepare for the next big storm, which will be another big storm. And then another level of deeper dive into the finances, alternative things like that. And all this is being put together with a research library that's high quality information that'll be available. My thought was, part of this, we need that people can be a short guide to print out before you lose power. But if you have power, you can go on a deeper level. Oh, next slide. I just, the amount of damage is incredible. A lot of people know of Katrina, 125-mile-an-hour winds. Well, Helene, well, pretty much at the coast, was 140 mile an hour. Diameter, 400 miles versus 800. Wind field, 230 miles, Katrina, 350 for Helene. So it was a big one. I saw this on my weather sites a week ahead, forming in 2 weeks or 2 days before it hit. In bold print, they said it was going to be the worst storm of your life. Next. This kind of says it all. The darkened area are the power outages immediately after Helene. And there's a new guide out that is a review of that mentions the millions of people that were out of power here. But next slide. It's the event is a 7-state event, and this happens to be the headwaters that we use for the Southern Appalachian from Roanoke, Virginia, down to northern, really Alabama, and it's all watersheds. And that's where our huge, unique situation is, that the mountains basically make their own rain, uplifting the waters coming up from the Gulf. It's only going to go down to the streams, and that's where the infrastructure is. That's where your roads are, your major basins, and utilities, everything. So, and the ridges in between. So when you lose communication, you can't just easily connect. But I'll point out kind of center screen, there's the French Broad and the Nolichucky that severely impacted this area. Next. I found this picture that was in the archives of TVA, and it talked about a small community. And I recognize this as a family holler. You know, grandpa's up, grandson are all in here, but it shows how water is concentrated into those streams. It has no place to go. So Katrina really seemed to me Helene is coming up to be a half dozen disasters in one. Surging flooding, debris fields. More people were killed, with some up to 2 miles long, than any other one event. Of course, economic. This was our main tourist season, and it's going to be a major hit. I mean, many billions of dollars are going to be lost in the area. I also see it as a setup for fire. That's what the next step, I think, is, that we've got to really study how to handle fire. And we're actually pushing that up in our working group to get that published sooner. And just the change of the landscape. People ask me, when will we be normal? Well, I could say 50, 60 years or 1,000 years for old growth forests. So let's go to the next slide. Center screen is 7 a.m. Friday. That's when I lost my internet and phone service. I did not lose my power or water. I'm in Waynesville, and the western part of it less damage than the eastern. Next slide. This shows it a little more carefully and how it's circled and jagged back to west, and the wind speeds changing are by the colors. Next. Um, yeah, this is almost 5 million people. I think this is Duke Power's list of outages. And, North Carolina over 1 million, South Carolina 1,200. So, significant. Once again, an area that greater than the size of the state of Massachusetts, over 12,000 square miles. I found out you can get daily data from Greenville Airport, and this was the surge of the middle day of Helene. And I know of places that the maximum they got 30 inches of rain during the whole event. We had some 8 to 10 to 12 inches of rain a few days before the event. So we were very wet soils and starting to have some minor landslides. But when Helene came in force, it really hit the eastern ridges of the Blue Ridge in a manner of tree destruction and flooding there too. Next. This is showing more concentrated the various rain. Basically, there was a strip pretty much from Asheville up to Boone that was the highest. And then there were little pockets where there were 2 feet and almost 3 feet. So this I'm putting this one up just to show that depending on your watershed, it really affects how much water you get. But the main light blue you see in the middle, that's right along the French Broad River. So they got hit pretty bad. Next. So this is showing damage. There's new technologies. The Forest Service can they use a couple infrared variety to get this imagery, but the amount of damage. Roan Mountain, the blue in the middle here, was a grassy ball to start with, and everything on the eastern side of it, and pretty much you can see up to I think the Iron Mountains, which would be Tennessee line. The ridge tops are just devastated. Next picture. So with all the rain and wind, there were at least 2,000 landslides. And I think those are defined as either ones that affect roads. I know that there are more landslides than that because I've seen unreported ones. Usually if we get 3 to 5 inches in 2 days, we start to have landslides. So major road damage. Next slide. I was up, these pictures are mine. I was up at Elk Mountain Scenic Highway, which is just north of Asheville. Was a very beautiful bicycle ride. And I have clients up there. I do water wells. And I went up just before and then after Helene. And my marker and spray paint of the ground were blown away. I mean, surveyor flags I can understand, but to have the ground level, I actually physically spray paint the ground level to make it semi-permanent. I had to go back and remark it. But anyway, this is going up toward the Blue Ridge Parkway with just masses of debris, hanging debris. And this is where I'm seeing major fire hazards coming. We're going through our second. Western North Carolina tends to have 2 dry seasons, October to December, and then March for a couple of months, right? February to March. Anyway, right now we're in that second one, and there are hundreds of small ones around, and this stuff is going to dry for a year or 2, and then it's going to be some major trouble. Next slide. This is actually taken on the Appalachian Trail, and this is not a lumber yard. This is how the trees have fallen down that thick, and they simply have cut a road through it. Reading some other guides, the size of the firewood is going to affect so many intensities Right now, the larger diameter trunks are more important for access to fight the smaller stuff. But we have a tinderbox out there. So please have an evacuation plan, an alternative plan, and a meeting plan for folks. Next, I've lost mine. I'll mention flooding. I could show you lots of ugly pictures. Whole towns were affected, especially Swannanoa. So I'm really glad Kevin's here to, focus on that. And then the flooding on the rivers districts through Asheville and Marshall and into Irwin, Tennessee were just totally devastated. I saw one estimate that Haywood County, 83 billion gallons of water flowed out of the county due to Helene. So next slide. This is my front yard. I live in Waynesville. Luckily, we got a stream restoration grant before I moved here, and it worked, but it was expensive, and it took agencies. And I'm afraid that agency cooperation in the future is going to be limited because of funding. So what we need to do is learn how to do this at lower tech things, indigenous knowledge of protecting waterways, and we want folks to come in and make their suggestions and add their expertise and tell us what we're not thinking about. And I think the basic guide is almost in a form that we can release, so that it's cleaned up, so the tables and charts are look good. And go from there. And we encourage you to attend any of our other meetings and sign up for the working group. Basically, tell us a little bit about yourself. That's very helpful. And yeah, I knew I had a couple more. Basically, I think we're at the top of the hill. Okay, every catastrophe has a similar sort of curve of emotional impact. And, we're at the heroic, incredible community, more than I've ever seen, came together to support themselves. But, that's a mountain tradition because, we were fairly isolated due to these, ridges and streams. And so we're going to have our ups and downs, setbacks. This mentions maybe a year to reconstruction, but it's going to be many years. Next slide. So I don't know if you can, well, this is a poster that we've put together that has the barcode. And is this the easiest way for them, Jesse, to just click their phone and go to it? Or
for some it will be, but others I'll drop the link, an invite link for the crossing in once we're done.
And that tells you a little bit more about it. And I have survivor guilt because I was on the very western edge of incredible destruction. And Kevin was in the center of two major areas. That and Silo community above Mount Mitchell got hit pretty bad. They had the 30 inches of rain. So and just to rely, here's a checklist that FEMA put out. Next, this is what one community started putting out, saying, put a poster board up at the community center, start writing it out. And this got more formalized. It took a while because of communication problems. The emergency people couldn't, get online and get information, find out who was where. So that is a top concern in the future. And hopefully we'll have convenient checklists in these pre-thought of in our guides to help people go, whoops, I should have had that radio have extra batteries or something. Next. This is another one I took. This was like a month. This is above Lake Lure. And actually, I went by a lot of sites that people would spray paint no photo. And I respected that. And if you think about it, there's a level of shame and hurt. And I came back a month well, 2 months later, and there was a driveway, and across here, there's a house actually up above center top, and it's not the code, I can tell you, but they can get in and out. So that's amazing. Next slide. Asheville. Uh, this is the distribution of trees that were damaged around Asheville, and they actually had a major study done. And I'm running long on time for sure, but um, documented that red oaks and white pines, they were the worst to go over. Certain age classes, the destruction was entirely due to wind, because the 83% of the trees that were inspected had no damage or root rot or anything. So now Asheville is going to be a more airy and open town. It's going to be more of a heat island. So it's something we've got to consider. This is another disaster, affecting long-term local climate. Next. Is that it?
Looks like that's it.
Yay.
Well, thank you for framing things for us, and so viscerally too with some of these pictures. I really appreciate it. And this will set up Kevin very nicely, I think. Let me do an introduction to Kevin, and then Kevin can just piggyback on that. If you have slides, that's great. If not, all good, Kevin. We just like to hear your perspective and what you've been up to. So Kevin Jones began his career as a weekly journalist in the poorest county in Mississippi. Along with his wife and business partner, Rosa Lee Harden, he went on to run a number of successful publications and trade journals in the state. In the mid 90s, Kevin launched the first web based legislative monitoring and legal opinion service in the country. Excuse me. Oh, that's awesome. The same year, the Netscape browser came out. That's great. Having a profitable internet-based business in the year the web launched enabled him to understand the business potential of the web, which he leveraged to create the first business-to-business internet conferences. In 2008, Kevin partnered with Tim. Can you pronounce that guy's last name for me?
Freundlich.
Thank you. To create one of the first impact investing funds. While the fund was successful, Kevin and his partners quickly realized that the ecosystem needed to change for impact investing to succeed. This led to the creation of SOCAP, Social Capital Markets, which grew over 10 years from 600 to 3,000 participants and is credited with changing the narrative on impact investing. Now, Kevin and Rosa Lee have launched F plus F. Is that how to say that?
Neighborhood economics is what you should say.
Okay, perfect. And you'll tell us much more about that.
Yeah.
To let Christians get their money and their beliefs in line in order to do the hard, catalytic, patient work the world needs. And
they're just one sector. The FSS is a subsector of neighborhood economics, so it's just it's one part of the chorus.
Okay, and so neighborhood economics to pull together investors, practitioners, and planners to address economic issues in local communities. So that was a decent setup, Kevin, but why don't you just tell us what you've been up to and what you feel is important to share here?
Well,
welcome.
Yeah, thank you. We'd done global conferences, and I became aware that the global conferences wanted things that would scale, where you could put things like venture capital into it. And a lot of the change needed to be local and maybe replicate in the next town. But you need philanthropy and the public sector, the city, the chamber, the community engaged in it. And we started looking at, we said words like the racial wealth gap, but you can't say now. So now we're looking at how everybody in the economy can thrive, just because I don't want to run into that back headwind. And so broadly, we've been looking at how to get economic power down to folks in neighborhoods that die 10 years younger, and that typically subsidize the affluent neighborhoods with their property tax. And we're also, with our conferences, looking at the ways the rules keep folks out of denying them opportunity through redlining and other things like that. If you're in a red line neighborhood, your family will not have a good second mortgage to enable a startup to grow. So we solve friends and family funding other ways. and that worked well. And then there was this flood, and I discovered the need for community coherent collective response in a way that the river ran through our house for 6 hours, and 3 feet of mud, and all that sort of thing. And Swannanoa is actually, they're telling me it's the easiest place for any of the big environmental and other nonprofits to raise money for now, because we display our devastation much better than other places. We've been on the front page of the New York Times at least 5 times, I think 6. That Trump guy has been here using us as a backdrop, if you remember him. We try not to, but we show the devastation so you can raise money around it now. We're a low status neighborhood. We have no grocery store, no hardware store. One restaurant has opened back. They're trying to take away our post office and our library. They do that to low status neighborhoods. They just, you're the place they take from. So it living here makes you aware of the disaster, because most of the rest of the county has their grocery store back, and their post office back, and their hardware store back, and their restaurants back, but we don't. So that becomes a reality. We've got, let me tell you 4 stories that we're gathering the Let Everybody Thrive and Change the Rules for Good conference that we were going to do, neighborhood economics. We were going to do it in November. And now let me tell you 4 stories of neighborhood scale resilience that I think will be relevant to your folks. 2 are food related. 1 is housing and workforce related, and 1 is pooling and sharing risk. So we're working with a network of urban gardens called Bountiful Cities. They're in 35 gardens around Asheville. We're starting in the 5 what they call legacy neighborhoods, red line neighborhood, the neighborhoods where people die 10 years younger. And with there, we are working on hyper local food production that it will be food sovereignty linked to climate resilience that will also be reparative. We're not trying to use the word reparations, because people get into how you count it, and the folks who know saying there ain't no counting for 400 years, so shut up. So just repair what's damaged. So food sovereignty, climate resilience, and repair. And we're doing that with a set of philanthropically funded hydroponics units that have worked in Namibia, of all places. Does 40% of the food there, but we're also working with gardeners to become what the county agent. We have one of the only urban county agents in the country, Michael Rayburn, who's with Rayburn Farms. It's actually a farm we've loaned to. They create the ingredients in a lot of beers. If you want jasmine in your beer, you go to Rayburn Farms. If you want, whatever, daisy stuff in your beer, you go to Rayburn Farms. And what he is calling side hustle farmers. And our goal is for folks in those legacy neighborhoods to get up to gig level income, $25,000 to $30,000, through something they could do at the community garden. And the community garden nonprofit is starting to sell both seeds that they have in their greenhouse, and now some vermiculture that is coming from Warren Wilson College, and Warren Wilson's a real partner. So we're helping that happen, and we're helping tell the story around that, because what I've found, and this is, I should probably find a better way to be more honest than I'm going to do right now, but I found that white folks care a little bit about economic justice, but not really. But I found that if you lead with food sovereignty and climate resilience, and that also starts with repair, and you start in those neighborhoods, creating a nonprofit social enterprise that could then sell into the affluent neighborhoods, because they want hyper local food production, because the grocery stores go out and you can't depend on the water and you can't depend on the electricity. So there's microgrids and things. So everybody wants it, and we'll create that business there. And they like it a lot. Foodies get involved and environmentalists get involved. Environmentalists are not really great at being involved in social issues. we were working with what is called Regen Asheville that apparently just broke after a month. The leader is leaving. I don't know what, but they didn't want to work with. So the second project I'll talk about is Resilience Force. And it has been doing this since Katrina, creating the workforce who can go beyond the volunteers to repair houses. And they help underemployed folks and undocumented folks learn building trades and then get certified because undocumented folks and underemployed typically get, paid cash and treated badly. So they can get them certified as a fascia finished carpenter, whatever. And some of that's philanthropic to start with, and then cities and counties get on board because they discovered these are low-cost job creation, and so they're less dependent on social services, and that's worked in a lot of places. But you have to get philanthropy in there and then get government to see that it's solving a problem that they care about. And we're working with them on a needs assessment, and it's kind of oddly, the needs assessment in housing just got taken over by the state, but they don't know the needs. So we're going to do a needs assessment of housing, and we're going to tee up the workforce because you can't. In Raleigh, they like to control Western North Carolina. They wanted to take over our school district and our water. We can do, we can generate power from our water in these hills and mountains. And they wanted to take away our right to do that. But they can't take away the needs assessment, and they can't take away the workforce. So we're working there with them to help launch that here. And they've done that, in New Orleans, and they did really good wildfire stuff. Sorry, in Sonoma County, working with Brock Dolman and OAEC on things like gully packing and other things. We've also gotten folks coming who are from an Oregon wildfire collective, because we all know that the land was scoured, and so wildfires are a problem. So you got to do things until the soil comes back to life. But they're also wanting to bring bioremediation at scale. And then there are lots of folks who get in these mutual aid networks and discover this is their calling, that this is what they should have been doing. And they help them transition to be case workers that get paid to do those sorts of things within the social service philanthropic infrastructure. And so those three things they'll be doing. Well, the Regen folks, which is part of the BioFi network, if you know those folks, they said, well, if you start using regenerative wood, we're interested. But otherwise, they didn't want to have a presentation on that because they don't do social problems. They just do regeneration. And I said, well, if you had a donut economics lens, you could have the environmental overshoot linked with the social undershoot. And they said, well, we do regeneration, and that's all we do. And so we will not present a program on a social problem unless you're using, wood we feel good about. And so I realized, okay, well, I don't need them to change. I'll just find the places where they can do what they do in their environmental silo. And I don't expect environmentalists to move out of their silo because I have not seen it. I tried to do donor economics, and it's too hard to do on a local basis. So that's an interesting thing. And now that Regen, they raised $100,000. They have a meeting space and a co-working space, and they just broke up after a month. I went downtown to try to find out. They were going to do a session at our conference April 1st and 2nd, and now the leadership is not talking to each other. So
that's too bad.
Yeah, it is too bad. Holistic environmentalists piss on each other. That's just seems to be, in my experience, what happens very often. And so, I don't know why that's true. It's not my problem, but I will, if they form, I'll be glad to work with them. The other project we're working on that is, I think, really interesting is a collaborative led by a really brilliant woman, Andrea Duvall, and she has an organic local distributor called Mother Earth Foods. And, my life was changed by World Central Kitchen feeding us through blunt pretzel and realizing a gift economy. But World Central sources from Cisco. And so she's got $1 million grant from the Red Cross, along with a health group that is doing social determinants of health, some techies are doing logistics, and a feeding program in the hood called Southside Gardens Equal Plates. And we think we can do disaster food response that doesn't rely on, that sources to the World Central Kitchens, because you want to use them, but they don't source locally. So we're trying to create a replicable module that will, because the growers were triply impacted by no farmers markets, no restaurants, and then all the food was being put out there was Cisco or whatever. So I think that's going to be really interesting. So we have two things on the food front, and both of those have a lot of grassroots enablement around it. We have a philanthropic grassroots investment platform, kind of like GoFundMe, but you get a deduction, and rather than the money go out, it can be a patient capital loan or philanthropic equity paid back by revenue share. We've done both of those. And so the money you give is actually paid back with a really patient loan. It can be 2 years of runway and 3 years of revenue share. It can be, depending on what the assets are. Growers can often handle a zero interest, 1 year forgiveness, no interest loan. But for the 90+% of Black-owned businesses that don't get to the fourth employee, they don't have assets to have collateral. They're not like a farm. So we're deploying that, and we've done it, got it down to got a mashup that enables any group that raises $5,000 to set up a revolving patient capital evergreen fund. So if they raise money to fix the stream in their cul-de-sac, they can get paid back by the savings that it has. One fourth session I'll mention is that we're looking seriously at collective insurance, because it doesn't make sense in a post-disaster economy for insurance to be for profit, because you can't factor the future risk. We are a bad risk right now, because the bridges that they're putting out to bridge the hollows are falling over because the land was scoured, so nothing's holding the land together. So if you can't assess risk, then you need to hold the risk locally. So there's a group out of Virginia that's apparently the only one that is doing climate-focused, community-focused insurance with 5 different trials, and we're bringing some of those folks down. But anything you do to reduce the risk, well, therefore reduces your collective premium that you do locally. And so we're bringing those ideas together. Like if you look at the resilience force, there's a lot of folks they have identified who can tote the note of their mortgage, and they have insurance, but not enough insurance to repair. So could that group collectively insure and pay premiums that would pay for their housing repair? I mean, that's a thing you have to move toward. You need some philanthropy to put up some money ahead of it. And we've got about close to 15 philanthropic or impact funds coming. And all we're trying to do is keep an economy focused with an assumption of abundance and acting in reciprocity. So we're building a currency. And if you know Reiki, who was at the heart of seeds, he's coming to help us understand some gains. And could there be a currency maybe linked to his seeds or whatever that could link all these projects, the Mother Earth, which is the supply chain for disaster, Bountiful Cities, which is hyper-local food production linked to local resilience with repair, and the workforce that suddenly are folks who are not at risk of being stopped. They have an ID that says they are, a finished carpenter and they work for X. And so it's giving them, undocumented folks and folks without, all those folks need documentation and validation and somebody to call who knows their rights. So we're getting in there with them. And so that's what's building, and we have really interesting experts from, like I said, Oregon wildfire who've come, folks who've done a lot of a guy who's coming from Gaza, who's also been working, since the earthquake in Haiti, on looking at a system that doesn't rely so much on the federal government. You have to imagine, and it's kind of easy to imagine, that the federal government is not the backstop that it has been. I mean, FEMA has lots of problems, but in the last 3 weeks, starting 3 weeks ago, they took 200 million tons of debris from my farm. Last week, they took 200 million tons of debris from my farm. You can see the ground now. There are not storage buildings and houses that floated downstream. There's not all the trees that are piled up. I mean, the devastation is so overwhelming. Probably my neighbor 2 doors down pictures it best. He was at a bend in the river and was up about 25 feet and had a lot of riprap. And on the 27th, the river moved 100 yards, and he's got 25 feet of riprap over dry ground, and the river just moved. There's now, where there were trees, there's sandy beach that nothing's growing on. Warren Wilson across from us had row crops, and now they have sand dunes. We had hugelkultur and glamping and places to sit and talk, and now we've got 3 to 4 foot sand dunes. So we're working with the Eastern Band on we have a lot of river cane, and they don't have enough river cane to supply their double weave baskets that can hold water and sell for $3,000. And we happen to have on our farm a huge amount of river cane of the kind they like. They like it 6 feet long and about a thumb width thick. And so we're working with them on letting them tend it, is what they want to call it. And you have to give them what's called free and unfettered access. And that just means here's a place to park, and you don't have to ask the permission of any white man to go to where your ancestors used to be. And we also have an undefiled village site that is across the river from a village that was there 5,000 years, well, 1,400 years, really, from 1,000 to, anyway, about 1,400 years, around from 1,000 to 1,400. Anyway, and then they, went toward the koala boundary. Nobody knows why, but they dug them up and they put people's bones in a jar in a way that the tribe didn't like. So we're in the process of ceding that village site to the tribe. And, in my experience, if you act like you have all the time in the world, you get things done a lot quicker working with natives than if you come in saying this is what to do. And, my meetings with them have been like, go to see Tyson, go to see his grandmother, go to see his mother, go to see his medicines, go see this ridge he doesn't bring people to that has a story. And 8 hours in, you get 45 minutes of business done, and then you can do it easier the next time. And so we're working with him and a group called RT CAR, which is Revival of Traditional Crafts. And you just got to start that conversation going. And there's a foundation that wants to be around the multicultural aspect of that, because a bunch of folks who live up the river from me and down, who have rebel flags, their land will be restored a lot faster if they let the natives tend the river cane. They don't say harvest it, they say tend it. And so they will have to be in the situation of realizing our property value will rise faster if we just let the Indians park someplace where they can park and let them come and go as they please, or their land won't be restored, because there's a lot of permaculture folks wanting to do, and we're going to try to do, George Brabant and other folks doing compost at scale and a whole lot of vermiculture things. But there's nothing that can do the scale of bioremediation that needs to be done here that is in the existing players. I'm hoping that Resilience Force can gather those things in from other places. But bioremediation at scale is going to be a huge need. And so next year, I'll just say this, we want to do another conference here looking at the post-disaster economy next April. I'm leading it to younger people. I'm going off to be out of the country and writing a book, but I'll be checking in. But, founders got to give up control, or you become a micromanaging visionary who only manages to his own vision. And there's a lot of that going around, and I've worked with them, and I don't want to be one. So I'm going to be 75, so I'll be just influencing as they, but nobody will report to me after this conference. I'll be I'll be doing my last gathering together of the whole conference. But we want to do something like a bioremediation trade show on our 16 acres that's across from Owen Park, which is a greenway and the most central gathering place in Swannanoa that they're restoring. It's kind of crazy. It had two ponds, and the Beetree Creek that came in above our farm went through the park, and so the river has changed its course, and so the Swannanoa is actually much weaker next to our farm than it would have been otherwise, and our house is actually standing because of a geologic event that saved it. And so we're talking to Riverlink and the county and all that kind of stuff, and we will do a FEMA buyout if this FEMA thing exists next March, and we'll build some other kind of, my daughter wants to build a retreat center there and bring back glamping and those things, and that can all happen if we sell to FEMA. And if FEMA doesn't exist, well, we had flood insurance and we'll renovate. There's always a chance that the federal agencies that you count on won't exist next year. I don't know if you've heard of the odd things that are going on in Washington. We do want to build something that is less affected by Washington and less dependent, but that's where we are. And there's a lot of folks coming to help who have lots of expertise, who've been through lots of disasters. So we're going to listen to a lot of those folks.
Great. Wow, Kevin, that's amazing. You got a lot of projects going on, all of which are very interesting. And we don't have the biggest group, so I think, guys, if you're cool with it, instead of breakout sessions, let's just put any questions we have for Kevin, comments in the chat. And Kevin, let's go for another 10, 15 minutes on this, and then I'd like to switch it over to Corrine, and she can give a bit of an update. So with all that Kevin has just laid on our table, does anybody have any thoughts or questions that pop up? And I'm going to put a prompt question in the chat that might help frame it a little bit. I know there was one question about what organization were you mentioning when you're talking about the zero interest loans and the payment programs that are more slow ramp.
It's Eagle Market Street CDC, but the platform is a donor advised fund platform called Impact Assets. It's about $3.5 billion. They've spun off this thing called Catacap to go more grassroots, so you can get a DAF. Like Blue Note Junction is an example. They're in one of the legacy neighborhoods, Burton Street, and they've got 8 CDFIs helping them build a community center and food place, and they've got greenhouse gas money that will pay for geothermal and solar, but it's reimbursement. So typically they would just do a GoFundMe kind of thing. Now they're doing it on the philanthropic platform, but they can do it and it'll be paid back. And so the $50,000 will then go back to in that case, I think Blue Note is a for-profit subsidiary of the nonprofit Garden. So it's a little complicated. We have a community development corporation that gets the money out at $5,000. And that's replicable, but you need a local folks to do the due diligence and underwriting. But if you look at catacap.org, there's a lot of catacap.org. There's a lot of things up there, but we're the only one that gets it out that low. Nobody wanted to build it for a group that small before, because everybody wants to scale and be big. It's like, no, let's get small and put the money out with folks who don't have it.
Yeah, I love that approach.
Emily, you have a question?
Yeah, go for it, Emily.
Hi. I was just a thing that stood out to me is when you were talking about the one environmental group that you'd been working with, who seems to have kind of disbanded. Something clearly has happened. And a thing I'm just wondering about from your experience is, do you have any advice on how to work with different communities and organizations where your values might be very different, what you're focusing on that's important to you might be different, but you're kind of working towards the same goals, or you acknowledge that there's ways you can support each other. I find
Yeah,
that that's difficult for some orgs, that they're just in their lane and they don't necessarily
yeah,
out.
yeah. Um, well, I'll tell you, I worked with a group called Ajito Verde in Michoacan with the Purepecha people, and it was at its time the largest non-timber forest product regenerative thing on this continent, and it was pine resin. And the two pine resin refineries had lost 60+%. Sorry, this FEMA truck's going by. So, through climate change. And one of the big problems is it's really hard to invest in an indigenous community where nobody owns title to the land. And so they figure, or typically what happens is the leaders say, I own title, I'll take the money, I'll go to Cancun, and everybody gets screwed. And your extractive resource folks come in. But they figured out a thing called usufruct rights, which just meant that the collateral was the pine resin. And pine resin is like if you use a ballpoint pen, pine resin is what makes the ink stick to the paper, right? I mean, it's a glue in 100+ things. If you have leather shoes with rubber soles, thank pine resin. And so I got with this group of 5 family offices, and we've not seen regeneration at this scale. This is amazing. And then they realized we can't invest in it. And they said, why? I said, well, they want the trees. The family office, family offices are like where rich families gather together, right? And they intergenerational. There's a patriarch and matriarch made the money. These are 5 of them got working together. They said, well, this is based where indigenous wealth creation is material, which means it matters, and the project doesn't work if you don't have it, to indigenous wealth creation. And what we can do from our environmental perspective is say, do they poach? Are they good labor? Is there civil unrest? Valuing the indigenous who live there, who are going to do the non-timber forest products, which is what really causes regeneration to happen. They could not look at the people as valuable because they had an environmental perspective that only looked at, do the people poach trees? Are the people good labor? And is there something that would cause us to not put a reserve there that is civil unrest? So I think it's a bifurcation that is very common. It's a bifurcation that's very common. I've run into it a lot. So I don't try to work with environmentalists much unless they have a perspective where they can value indigenous wealth creation or something like that, or everybody thriving in every neighborhood. So I'm not saying they should be different. I'll work with them when we can work with them. But sometimes they can't invest because they can't, in their structure, in their epistemology, the way of seeing the world, they can't see the value of indigenous people.
Kind of getting out of their own way seems difficult.
Yeah, Ansel Adams never had a tribe in any of his pictures because he believed in a pristine wilderness, and so this gets back to a perversion of the Christian doctrine of providence. The land was given to us, and nobody who's on the land matters. And so Willie James Jennings is a Black theologian and writes about that a lot, and how that came to be. Because they were also able to look at slaves that way, slaves as a source of wealth, and they could see indigenous folks as the land was not claimed. There's a really interesting book, Maps and Dreams, that was written by a Canadian anthropologist, and he had to work with the First Nations because there was a bunch of money coming from a pipeline. And he had to work with the tribes on how they tended the land. And so one of the things I remember was that they looked at a beaver pond, and he said, these beavers will not be ready to harvest for another 4 years. And so the folks who looked at, is the land being managed, couldn't have a thing that was a 7 to 8 year timeline for management. And when management meant hands off for 7 or 8 years, it didn't fit with the Western timeline. So it was really risky for them to talk because hiding had been the way to be safe. So they had to explain the value of a 7-year management to folks who think in quarterly returns on the pipeline. So it's a really good book about those two timelines together. And there was enough of a payoff that they would tell the story and explain how they manage. And that was one of the ones that was really interesting. That the men, they'd left it for 3 years. It had to be left for 7. Year 8, you can hunt a beaver and it's not going to harm anything.
Yeah, that's
Native timeline is not our timeline.
nor our natural cycle timelines, right? I have a question, Kevin. Oh, sorry, Emily, if I'm jumping over you. About donut economics and the role that plays for you. Do you use that as a primary framework?
I have tried, and it's really hard. They have a whole the average citizens doing their portrait. I'm going to research it again because I've got to find a way that gets the environmentalists who only want to see good trees working in the same place as people who need jobs before we can afford good trees in these houses. And it's the only, and if you look at it, there's a thing called DEAL under there, which is donut economics. They have case studies where it worked. I'm not going to do it, but it's having run into it again. And, just this morning, I went down to where they're meeting at the Regen, and they're closed, and no way. I left Post-it notes, right? Post-it notes with my card. But they had 150 people, at their gathering less than a month ago, and they were going to be big, and they are 3 weeks later they can't hold it together, and I don't know why.
Yeah, that's too bad. Any other questions for Kevin while we have him here? And then Kevin, you might want to tell us a little bit about the event coming up in April too, and who might want to go, and what's exciting about it.
If you're looking at, there's the number of experts who are coming up with ways to do disaster resilience that works on a local level is really pretty extraordinary, and I'm getting more of them who are doing it. Some of which are going to do it here, but others are groups that consult and will come to your town, that sort of thing. Resilience Force wants to build a school here so they can train, the folks in mutual aid who learn that, there really is a thing called caseworkers at the mutual aid level, and get some county and city funding for. And they want to, and then send people out who are doing that kind of thing. So if the integration of a patient, permaculture like approach to a place where we had a lot of holistic stuff. Asheville's wonderful, except it only works for some folks. I mean, this is a place where people bring their own job, right? And it's tourist, and so there's the number of people who are vulnerable are folks that don't show up. One thing we're doing is that there's a group creating a Latino business alliance, because there's a restaurant association and they got a restaurant employee repair fund, but right now there's no vehicle for aid money to help caterers or food trucks, which is largely Latino here. So we got to form the association so that you become a line item. And so, some of the stuff is conscious group forming of groups that have been out of the game, that the funders can't see. So that's one of the things. There's several things like that. There are group forming kinds of things that are, Appalachian Watershed Alliance there's lots of groups forming that are doing really good stuff. I like Appalachian Watershed Alliance. I thought I liked Regen. They just don't seem to exist this week. They were big 3 weeks ago and had 150 people, and now they, I don't know.
Maybe they'll be back next week.
You lose something when you say, you're leaving.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the regenerative approach is great, and it works for some folks. There are 14 groups trying to do intentional communities here. I know of only one of them who is looking at what the impact of their coming in would do to folks in double wide trailers who would be displaced by their property taxes rising in ways they couldn't afford. So I think, regenerative people need to be, communities need to be aware of their displacement potential, because they don't mean to do it. These are sort of not exactly gated biodiverse communities, but they're intentional biodiverse communities. Again, they are there are folks at risk with when folks come in. Gentrification in the country is by the folks up the hill who make it so you can't live down, and they also don't take care of their neighbors downstream. So I think regenerative folks who would be aware of their impact on displacement would be a really good thing, because they're all using permaculture techniques, and they all share essential oils and do all the holistic healing things that are wonderful to do, and they're just not aware of their broader impact.
Sabina asked a question. A lot of us are interested in making these connections before a disaster might strike us. Do you have
Right.
any ideas about what to do, ahead of time?
Yeah. There was one neighborhood in Swananoa where that worked, and it's Graymont, and they have a public library, and they have a park, and they do movies in the summer at the park for kids. And so when the first need of aid came in, you talk to the leaders in Grovemont, I'm sorry, and they knew where the shut-ins were and where the babies were and the influence are. And so, doing needs assessment ahead of time makes you all safer. And then, so it's, asset mapping, community-based asset mapping, asset-based community development, ABCD is actually there are techniques in how to do it. And there are also groups helping you measure the social capital. And one group I work with in Cincinnati, it's a low status red line neighborhood, and they did use the neighborhood vitality index to enable the folks doing refinance of mortgages to realize that that neighborhood was more resilient than they thought, and less risky, because they were seeing all the ways that people were sharing childcare. They were sharing when people were sick. All the risk factors went down when they saw the social capital at work. So, doing asset mapping and making the mortgage lenders realize they should lower the mortgage rates on places where they think the risk is more. So asset mapping in places that look at risk is a really good thing to do. And there's several groups doing that. But that one in Cincinnati has been doing it longer than a lot of folks.
Yeah, that's great. And Elizabeth just put a good link to asset-based community development course on the PCX with our beloved Zan Bonefast. So that's something that we're very keen on teaching about and providing resources for. All right.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions for Kevin? And then we'll move over to Corrine and updates on the work that the Disaster Resiliency Initiative has been up to.
Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. This is great.
I'm probably going to have to get off. I've got event details to do and stuff.
Yep, I get it. And thanks again for being here and sharing with us. And maybe are people able to come and join your conference? Is it?
Oh yeah, it's neighborhoodeconomics.org. And we still have room. I got a second venue, the Foundry Hotel. We outgrew the first one.
Nice.
So yeah, and it's neighborhoodeconomics.org, and then it's /Asheville. And we would love to have folks.
Okay.
And we'd love to hear what you're doing, and then help us really build a post-disaster economy that works for everybody.
Amen to that. That's what the mission's all about, I think. And Kevin, maybe keep us on your radar too. In August, we're likely to have a summit on these types of events, and we'd love to bring you back.
I'd love to do it. I'm going off to be out of the country and work on a book through into July, but I'll be back in August. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well,
right.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yep. Talk to you soon. Oh, wow. What a wealth of information and connectivity Kevin is. I wrote down a bunch of notes, so we'll have to track all that information down and share it in the PCX. Let me do a quick overview before I introduce Kareen, an overview of the Disaster Resiliency Initiative, just so people are familiar with what we're doing and how you can plug in. This is a group formed, like Lee gave us the big vision post Helene of why we're here right now. But since then, a lot of things have happened within the working groups and the coordinating committees. But I just wanted to share this. I think this gives us a sense of kind of what we're up to and how you individually here in this call might plug in if you feel inspired or if you have certain resources. So the project aims to mobilize the permaculture regenerative community to design, create, and maintain high quality repository of information on mitigating, responding to, and recovering from climate related disasters using regenerative design principles, with the primary focus right now on Western North Carolina. But also to develop a series of manuals, which Lee showed a picture of, and there's several others in the works on fire and flood. Specifically, there's like the big disaster manual, and then there's going to be smaller guides per I guess, disaster event type. And then we want to disseminate this information to key community members, such as disaster organizations, other nonprofits, community leaders, farmers, and work with them to ensure that they can put it to use effectively. The idea is people might print these out and have them in their homes already before any type of disaster is even thought of, and then like Lee was saying, when you recognize, oh, I think it's coming, I think it'll be here in a few days, you can start to go through the checklist and like organize your neighborhood and your family and friends and that sort of thing. And then, of course, weaving together a network of communities and professionals like we just did with Kevin, bringing in different folks, different ideas, who's doing what, who's already been making strides in this type of effort, and what can we learn from each other? How can we fast track our knowledge? And this is a partnership involving ARC. ARC and PINA co-host the PCX. So ARC, PINA, PCX, and we regenerate with Kareen. So I would like to read Kareen's bio and then invite Kareen to share sort of updates. So yeah. So, Kareen Brennan. Kareen Brennan is a highly experienced permaculture designer and educator with a passion for food forestry, small farms, food security, and community building. She has taught permaculture design extensively in the United States and internationally. Kareen responded to the Haiti earthquake in 2010, organizing a permaculture team who used design principles to integrate regenerative solutions into disaster response and recovery. And actually, I think that's captured on Town Hall number 2, if I'm not mistaken. Kareen can let me know. But if you want to see pictures of that work that Kareen and her partners did in Haiti, I think that was in Disaster Town Hall number 2. She worked with others to expand these efforts and has continued to communicate the opportunities to rebuild human systems harmed by disasters in more regenerative ways. Kareen has a permaculture farm in Florida and is a PINA diplomate and board member, and she teaches permaculture design online and in person. And she's also, we should say, the lead in compiling most of this data for our group at this time. She's done a ton of the work, and we greatly appreciate her brilliant mind and her efforts. So, Kareen, welcome. I know you're like in a hospital somewhere, but thanks for being here. And I'm happy to share screen if that helps. Otherwise,
Yeah.
give us an update.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, I'm caring for a relative in the hospital and I have to wear a mask. So forgive me. But yeah, I can't take it off. Anyway, yeah, so our main focus right now is putting together some manuals that could be printed out and distributed to any community group or public libraries or wherever, and schools. That's going to be simple, straightforward, and have the solutions for disaster response within a permaculture framework. And a lot of this quick responses, or the prep, like right before the disaster hits, that's going to be very basic. It's like get in your car and get out of there kind of thing. So there's not a whole lot of regenerative practice within that. The real place where we're going to dive in on that would be in the deeper dive sections of the manuals, and those sections will have solutions that can be implemented. Some of them are relatively simple and fast, some of them are more complicated, but those are the solutions that would both mitigate the disaster on a long-term basis, i.e. cut down on greenhouse gases, pollution, degradation of the environment, etc., and would also help mitigate the disaster because of the way that things are built and managed. And this is challenging. It's a great design exercise for permaculture because we often don't combine those two things. So we may make this beautiful cob house, but is it fire resistant? Is it flood resistant? Is, for a 10,000 year flood and not just a 100-year flood? Because that's what we experienced in Western North Carolina. So these are the kinds of questions that we're now asking as designers. And by bringing all of these energies together in one place, we're hoping to get the best answers available to us. And of course, like any permaculture design, this is an evolving process because nature is evolving, things are changing, we're changing, but we're trying to grab onto the best practices that we have available to us now to give people a template of actions that they can take as much as possible. And of course, everything is site specific. It depends. But there are templates and there are best practices. And as I've been researching fire response and fire preparation in California, they've done a lot of deep work on this, having been through many fires and figured out, what kind of structures and what kind of setup actually survives even a high wind fire event, So we're looking for those kinds of things, the really resilient and robust solutions. So where we're at right now is we're focusing on completing the fire manual. Let me back up just a minute. The main manual that we're creating is an overall look, which will include the steps that you would take in just about any disaster scenario to prepare and to respond. So there's evacuation in a lot of disasters. There's different kinds of go bag. So that's going to be in the main overall manual. An example would be in a deeper dive section. You want to have a water supply, and you want that water supply to be resilient. And that's something that a lot of permaculturists kind of neglect. They may have a 275 gallon tank to keep their water in, and that's it. And it's not enough. And it's not secure the way that it's designed. So we're deep diving into this kind of thing and really looking at how to make things most resilient. And thank you. Yeah. And things like communications. How many of us have a ham radio license or walkie-talkies or some way of communicating in case the cell system goes down, which it did massively in Western North Carolina because the main cell tower or structure was in a flood zone. So it's good to know these things about your own local area. So that's the overall guide, and that's a big chunk. That's going to take a little bit to complete. So we're also focusing on these specialized guides, which have the specialty steps for that particular disaster. So in fire, you have specialty steps to prepare your landscape to be less fire prone and to be less likely to catch your house on fire. That's not necessarily going to be the same as preventing a flood, for instance. It's going to be a different design activity. So right now we're focusing on finishing the fire manual because it's pretty close. and it is a risk in Western North Carolina, as Lee pointed out. And then we also have flood, heat, winter storms, earthquakes, hurricanes, et cetera, et cetera. The major natural disasters. And we also could consider doing some man-made disasters, like a major release of pollution event, et cetera, economic disaster. So, this feels really good to be doing this in a group. And we do need the group genius to participate in this, because our little group doesn't know everything. So we're really looking for people to send us their ideas. We're trying to make it as simple as possible by having this PCX group, the working group, where you don't have to do anything in that group. Just join and watch the conversation. But if you come across something as you're going through life that is a great case study about disaster response or a good mitigation technique, then please post it in the group. Just take a few seconds and post it in there, and then we'll assess it and add it wherever we're going to add it. So the manuals are short and sweet. They're focused. We're trying to get the top-notch best practice in there. But the library, which is online, will be much more robust and can include a lot more information. So that's the overview. I hope it was clear. And yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask.
That was clear to me. Thank you, Corrine. Appreciate that, all the work you've done and the overview. There's a prompt that I'll put in related to what Corrine was just talking about. That part of the network weaving piece that we mentioned earlier is really like harvesting ideas and insights and inspirations from you all. So the question in the chat is, and you can put answers in the chat, or you can just raise your hand or just unmute yourself. We got a small enough group. What would you do to strengthen or extend the work Corrine presented? What gifts, skills, and abilities would you be willing to contribute? And we're not asking for some deep, like 30 hours a week contribution, but when you can, when you're inspired, and on which subject matters that you maybe have special interest in. So, and other questions are fine too. That's just a prompt. But if you have questions for Corrine or Lee or anybody else involved, please let us know. Or if you have brilliant ideas about how we could best make this type of material more available, or who we should connect with to talk to about excellent work, please let us know. We're in the network weaving part of the town hall, I think. Yeah. So I'll just pause, and if people have something bubble up, just hop on in.
Hi. So I'm kind of in a unique position because I'm working in a university context. And so one of the things I'm really interested in is how do we take oftentimes very like grassroots community connections and the work that's being done there and integrate them into more, I would say, established like institutions. I'm in a Canadian context, so obviously like I understand it's a bit more complicated right now in the States. But complicated is probably, yeah.
Perfect.
But
Disaster.
I'm trying to be a diplomat. But what I'm interested in, because I'm kind of early on in my research, is figuring out what institutions and what connections are ones that are wanting to be prioritized, and where are the barriers in doing that? Because building a bigger community, the bigger the tent, the more resources. What are the barriers, and where would you really like to see these things land first? Maybe like, what's your wish list?
Yeah.
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, the what's happening in Western North Carolina is a great model because there's a lot of community strengthening and involvement, and we're seeing that the people, and I've seen this in other settings too, in Haiti and in Los Angeles and in different places, having watched disasters unfold. The churches are a main place where people come together. public institutions, not necessarily universities, but it depends on the university and a college, or, you know, as far as responding to a disaster or preparing for one. Anyone who wants this material can have it. And we have had a number of discussions about how to ensure that it's in the hands of the, you know, front lines, people who are actually going to be dealing with this. And also groups that are talking about adaptation, which oftentimes is universities or cities, et cetera. So we're, you know, there's a kind of different publics, and they read things in different ways, and they want things presented in different ways. So we'd love to get more feedback on that. I just wanted to mention really quickly that the We Regenerate group that Jesse mentioned that we're doing is an online directory of regenerative resources. And we will be focusing in on particular resources that respond to disasters in regenerative ways, or manage disasters rather, not just respond, but prepare to adaptation and climate change, all of those issues. And that website will also have, can link to anything in universities that are applicable, city people. We don't just want to list businesses, we want to list the sustainability directors. Though in the US, they can become a target. So, but you know, we want to help make those connections, because so many people on the front lines don't know what y'all are doing, or don't know what the nonprofits in their area are doing on this issue. And we're very open to suggestions. As I said, it's a group genius process. It has to be.
Thank you, Corinne. Maybe I'll reach out to you afterwards and we can talk more about this, because there's lots of stuff happening on my end.
I just put your email in the chat, Corinne. I hope that's okay.
Yes.
So people can reach out to Corinne sort of personally. My wish list, Emily, is small local governments who are directly affected or to be directly affected, because they seem like they would be the most. Then at a fractal level, they might be connected to more, you know, state grants or, you know, national sort of programs, which, you know, are in a little bit of disarray right now. But it seems to me the local leaders, whoever they may be, whether they're from churches or within the government or community groups, would be the key people that I would want to be able to reach out to and talk to and support.
Pivot point.
Yes, pivot point. Yeah. It looks like, Connie, you have your hand up. Come on in, please. You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Connie Cranford, and I don't think Corinne noticed that I was on here. So,
surprise!
I've been working with Corinne for a number of years on We Regenerate, and hopefully we'll be able to continue doing that with her in the future. But I didn't realize coming into this call how many folks are actually in Western North Carolina and focused on that task. I know Corinne through Florida primarily, but I also have a property right up in Crusoe, Lee, and I'm heading up there on Sunday for 2 weeks. So if you're in Waynesville, I'd like to connect with you and just kind of, you know, get a little bit more up to speed in Western North Carolina. I purchased the property back in 21 and was able to, you know, I think we had it for all of 3 months before the first flood went through.
Fred.
Yeah, through Pigeon. So we've managed to live through 2, you know, devastating situations up there, and my heart bleeds for the local community. So you know, it's we were pretty spared, but I'd say that for a lot of other people. So would if there's a way for me to connect with you, I would love to catch up with you next week when I'm up there.
My contact's in the chat.
Okay, great. Thanks.
That's cool. That's amazing that you're spared. So I'm glad to hear that, Connie. Sabina says one of the concerns I consistently see from folks is how to access medical care. Is both widened and upheld through disaster situations. Economic barriers are often widened under catastrophic circumstances. Definitely. And Corrine, I know you have some, I don't know if it's in the deep dive, but there's definitely some medical checklist prep type thinking that we're doing as well, because that's a really critical piece. And that's one of the things you can a little bit prepare for ahead of time if you're thinking about it. So maybe you or Lee or anybody wants to speak to the importance of medical resiliency.
There are herbal, things you can grow. And there'll be lists of the top 10 medicinal plants you should have and links to all that.
Some of the models that I've seen in Katrina and LA and different places is like Doctors Without Borders or street medics. Also free training, getting as many people as possible trained in basic emergency response. And, that's what you need. And it to be resilient as a community, like so many of us are specialists and we don't have these broad skills. A lot of people in the permaculture community have become more generalists and learn more different kinds of skills, but this is one skill that can be neglected, and we all should be able to give basic emergency care. And again, what Kevin was talking about, asset-based management and just knowing who in your area might need specialist care and working out beforehand, what are we going to do with that person, for that person. That's the whole neighborhood watch. And I saw this in LA after the Northridge earthquake. Some of the neighborhood councils and groups got together and started talking about this kind of thing of disaster response. So they had CERT training, which is community emergency response team training, which most areas are given through the fire department for free to citizens, which help you be part of the disaster response. But also they were talking about how can we be more self-sufficient and resilient as an individual neighborhood. And that's a whole nother topic. But in the old days, everyone had to do that because we didn't have the infrastructure to support. So, it's not like it hasn't been done before, but I don't see any way around it in these major disasters. I don't see any other way to handle it than to have that local resilience worked out.
Yep. No time like the present to get good at it. Emily, please hop on in.
Sorry to monopolize, but this is popping up lots of questions. But a thing that I'm interested in, again, like I understand this isn't my context, but in these manuals, how are community dynamics being navigated where people feel increasingly vulnerable and might feel like the need to secretive isn't the right word, but like protect themselves and not share a lot of information, where their friends and neighbors might be at risk of, having information found. I'm being vague, but I'm purposefully being vague. But a lot of people are feeling really vulnerable right now. And I think sometimes there is not as much education around this is how we communicate safely. This is maybe what we do talk about or don't talk about in front of people we don't know. And things and skills that maybe don't come to us unless we either have been mentored and educated in community, which is a huge blessing that not everybody has access to, or when tragedy has visited our lives and we've had to learn the hard way. So how do we navigate building strong communities while also acknowledging that community necessitates an amount of sharing and vulnerability that isn't necessarily safe for everybody? And how do we navigate that? And is that something that might be included in how these manuals are being built?
Yeah, and that's a really great question, a very thoughtful question. A lot of the neighborhoods, it's the neighbor next door that knows about the medical situation, and that's the only person that knows. And maybe that's how it should be. you know, um, it could be a very specialized group which gains the trust of people with medical conditions, that's even connected up with their official doctor network or wherever, that could have that knowledge and nobody else would know. That's a really good question. I don't have that can take some thought.
To be clear,
and input.
like the medical stuff also, but I'm thinking about people's, immigration status, maybe their gender identity, maybe just like things that right now feel very precarious, and that information is something that might not be safe to be public. And just, I don't know, I don't have an answer either, but it's how do we build these safe communities when sometimes we are interacting with people who make us unsafe, or might make people that we care about unsafe. So how do you build that trust when you're also constantly thinking about that? And it's a reality for a lot of people.
And a big one in the US right now. And I love, there's a group called Beloved Asheville.
Yeah.
I just love how they've approached it, because they're like, we love everybody. Everybody needs to help everybody else. We don't care about any of your background or beliefs or anything else. You're a human being. We're going to help you. And I've seen that happen in disasters after disasters. It doesn't happen so much before them. But, people just stop caring about what, your sexual preference or any of that stuff. You're drowning. I'm going to reach out a hand and help you, So maybe just cultivating humanity. It's a good question. A lot of us are struggling with it.
Well, I would say that, in permaculture, we've done a lot of, like, most of us have worked on our communication and nonviolent communication and different communication strategies. But one thing, when all of a sudden you're just mashing a bunch of random people together, is like our documents could have something about building trust, keeping privacy, what type of information you might choose to keep private or within a very sort of intimate connection or network, and what might be known to the larger group, and like it's really just about reminding folks it's okay, all of a sudden you're talking to random people in these situations and you're trying to figure out all sorts of complex things. Well, maybe medical information that's really pressing would be worth sharing with a larger group, but some more personal details of like your immigration status, it's like, protect yourself and build trust, and then eventually you may divulge whatever you want to divulge after trust is built. So I think we could just even have like a really rough, just addressing this particular question that Emily's bringing up as just a rough set of guidelines that I think that would be a wonderful addition to what we're creating here. So, but I don't have the answer either. I don't know that there is really an answer per se, other than learn how to do it. But yeah, it's interesting. Mental health problems also seem to go away during disasters, in terms of like, this has been documented in a book called Tribe. But like acts of situations where folks were like literally hospitalized in London with schizophrenia and like completely unable to do normal day-to-day tasks during the bombing, sort of came out and had full lucidity and were able to help one another and like basically not have schizophrenia at that period of time. So it's like there's something deeply dilating and focusing about the disaster, like you say, Corrine, that all of a sudden we just want to help. Most of us, right? It's like who's the Mr. Rogers, didn't he say look for the helpers or something? And it's like in disaster, so many people are just like all the other things go away and we just want to be very present. But the rebuild, that's when you start to get into, I would imagine, infighting, or like, we don't like these type of people, or that sort of like BS that humans can do sometimes. But Melanie, I see you're popping on. Maybe you have something to add.
Hi. Yeah, I was just wondering along with what to share, because I'm in a really big red state, and seems like the energy in general is really aggressive and just out. I'll have to figure out what it was, but it's a relationship pyramid, and it's just very general on like, these are the people that are in the general public that you come into contact with, like maybe the dog groomer or the cashier, and like what what's okay to share, what you can like how you learn how to trust people basically.
Cool.
And then like at the very tip top are your people that you know no matter what. But I'm just wondering if there's a way to somehow incorporate that into the concerns that Emily had.
I would love to see that if you at some point. You don't have to track it down now, but are you
Sure.
are you in the working group?
No, but I have been thinking about that. I don't know if I've put in there that I am interested on the app, but I
Okay.
just haven't, I don't think, heard anything.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll try to follow up, but feel free to join just to even post that one resource because that sounds really
Sure.
useful.
Okay.
And this is where our social work friends might have more resources as well. You know, I worked in mental health for years, so this space is being mapped, maybe not by us directly, but by adjacent allies. So I think that's a key piece to it all.
Just to jump in, I'm also have a mental health background, but I just wanted to pop in the chat this link. It's about surveillance self-defense of just how to use the internet and use apps and things safely, which I think it's just useful practice to start learning about before things keep changing. It's just a really useful online guide. So just if anybody's interested.
Wait, you're gonna put that in, you said? Yep. Okay, cool. Yes, that's great. I would love to. Yeah, like using zones too. Oh, Connie, hop on in. I don't need to keep talking.
No, I was just going to ask Karine, how much have you already reached out to the local emergency response committees and so forth that are managed by the governments? You know, we've got Hayward County and so forth, and each one, there's all various levels of hierarchy of emergency response. So have you tapped into that already to find out, how they're disseminating information and plan to piggyback with that? Or is this going to be more of an autonomous project?
We're willing to piggyback with anyone who will allow us to piggyback with them. I work with FEMA in different capacities, and they have a very, they're pretty overwhelmed as it is, and they have a very specific thing that they do. If it really depends on the individual. There was an individual in Los Angeles that was just very open and working with the community and integrating, and there's a couple others that were not interested at all.
But
so
if I understand it correctly, this is more of a
depends on the
proactive
individual
project.
capacity, I think.
Yeah, but this is more of a proactive project at first, right? Is trying to get educational material out into the community and building that infrastructure in a proactive manner so that we aren't so overburdened and overtaxed. We've got that go-to stuff at the fingertips right then and there to implement when needed. I think Lee wanted to say something.
Yep.
I've been attending community meetings and have a good grasp of the other projects going in agriculture and probably forestry. So I know who's out there, but we don't want to duplicate their work, but we do want to network with them. So we're dancing with it. That's part of this weaving now, figuring out how to best do that. The one thing I met more people in extension that knew what permaculture was than they were 20, 30 years ago. So that's a good sign. I was an agent and we couldn't talk about alternatives back then. So
that's right. Yeah.
Connie, I'm on the steering committee for the 7 counties in Florida to handle local food, and they're coordinating with other steering committees to work on adaptation for climate change, though they can't mention that word in Florida. Illegal. Anyway, so we're trialing some of that there, and I think the local organizations are going to be easier to integrate with than FEMA, especially because it's all up in the air as to what's going to happen with it. But yeah, it's a great idea. And, again, this is a group project. Anybody who has good ideas about how to integrate it further or how to push it further we're completely open.
Well, it is slated at this time in my agenda to share the how to follow up, what's next sort of conversation as we're winding down today. And so I just wanted to show people the PCX if you've not been there. This is a social media site, and it's more than that, but that's one way to think about it for permaculturists and run by permaculturists. It's run by PINA and ARC together. So this isn't the Zuckerbergs of the world running this, and we're really trying to cultivate a space where we can have our cohort meetings and like private groups or like local permaculture type groups or resiliency focused groups. And if you're interested in this particular subgroup, the Town Hall and the Disaster Resiliency Working Group, you use this little app function and scroll down. You probably won't have as much stuff as I do, but eventually you'll see Disaster Resiliency Initiative. So that's kind of the overall. And within that, we have 3 groups: the coordination group of the people working on it, like on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis; the working group, which is open to anybody with the invite. And that's where it's like you can just contribute ideas like, oh, or like cool resources like, oh, I just found this great resource about flood recovery, blah, blah, blah. We would love to have you just keep, especially Karina's like, I want the best resources possible, the best permaculture, the best resilient responses, recoveries, planning. So this can kind of be that space. And then this space is just for the town hall series, which the new town hall will eventually be posted here, and you can just keep up to date on who's coming in. I tend to run gathering up some of the speakers like Kevin Jones, but I do so upon request from Corrine or Elizabeth or Zan or Lee. So if you all have people like, who you need to have on and like hear from for 10 minutes is so and so, just ping me either in this feed section. If you hashtag and then start spelling anybody's name, it'll come up. That's the best way to get someone alerted to like, hey, Jesse Tack, I have this guy you should talk to, or this lady's doing amazing stuff, blah, blah, blah. I would really appreciate that. We're always looking to add more amazing speakers, presenters, and ideas. So that's that. You all are welcome to whichever way you can plug in. We'd love to keep the conversation going, and we'll keep doing these until the summit. And that'll be a really nice, big, multi-day long event that I think we're starting to get prepared for and looking forward to. Well, thank you, Corrine. Really appreciate you being here, even though you're not at home and not in a comfortable situation really at all. I hope everything goes well for you and your family, and great to see you, of course. Thanks, Lee, for being the head visionary and sort of like reason we're all here. Very much appreciated. Shout out to Elizabeth, who is part of these groups and sort of like does all the little things that, like just keep everything working and functioning. And great to see you, Melanie. I've seen your face before, so it's nice to see you. Nice to meet you, Connie. Glad you're here. Nice to meet you, Emily. Sabina, thanks for all your comments. Christine, thanks for being here. Appreciate you all, and maybe we'll see you again at the next town hall or somewhere along the line. Sound good? Well, I always end with a 1 breath in, 1 breath out. So let's do that now. Nice deep breath in. And as you breathe out, just let the shoulders drop, the jaw relax, the feet relax, and then off we go to the next thing, right? So I hope you guys have a great weekend.